Hey everyone, welcome back to Daily Stand-Up. You can see I have a blank web page up on the screen here, and what I'm essentially going to show you is how I wired up real-time notifications using SignalR from RabbitMQ ultimately down to my client. So if I actually go to RabbitMQ, I'm going to send a message, and it's going to, well, I'll show you in a second. So I publish a message to the queue, and you can see it pop up on the front end. Again, that's real time. So if I make a new, if I make a new tab and then move it to the side, and then I drag this one here, we can change this to be, we're going to do hello world and we're going to do bye world. We're going to publish that, and you can see it changed on the front end just like that in real time. So the way this works is I'm using SignalR to connect the client to the server. So let's go ahead and look at some of this backend code, and you can see how this all works. And I should say that being able to handle real-time notifications is probably one of those features that wherever you work as a software engineer, it's probably gonna show up somehow. So having this ability to just create it, and as you're gonna see, it's not hard to do, but just having this kind of like in your like toolbox of stuff to know how to do is gonna be super helpful for you. You're just gonna be like, you're gonna be glad you know how to do it, because it's gonna come up anywhere you work. So if we go, I shouldn't have minimized that here. If we go to our program.cs, so this is a startup pipeline. So one thing we have to do when we wire up SignalR, that's what we're using, is we have to make sure we've registered the hub. Basically, the hub is what the client is going to connect to. So we've registered this logging hub. And if we go to the front end source here, we can see that on my logging component in React, I have a connection established to that logging hub that we just saw. So I'm giving it localhost and my port number and then logging hub. And then I have this connection on, so you can see that connection on registers a handler that will be invoked when the hub method with the specified method name is invoked. So what this means is that when this log received method, so registers will be invoked when the hub method with the specified method name is invoked. So log received, when that's invoked, it's going to show me the message on my front end. So I'm just setting the state to be what the message is parsed out to be. So if we come back to the back end, I have a logging hub file created, and logging hub is inherited from hub, and I have a method here called send message, and it's just basically, this is basically like the default kind of implementation of this hub. And you have the option to basically send a message to whatever client is basically listening, in a sense, to this hub with this specific method invocation. So basically, because the front end has a connection to our logging hub, and is registered to listen to this method invocation of log received, it's going to get this message when it's broadcasted to all the clients. So basically we're saying, okay, everywhere that has a connection to my logging hub, get this message. So I could have multiple spots on my front end that are listening to this logging hub, that when I broadcast a message to all my clients, they're going to get that message. But the one nuanced thing that I had to do, because the message originates in RabbitMQ and I have a consumer to that queue, is I actually took this code basically and I put it on my consumer class. So I have a logging consumer that all that does is connect to my RabbitMQ logging queue that you saw. And I have, so this is basically just kind of like, you can see it's type of iConsumer, and I'm using mass transit. So if you use mass transit, this is kind of like the default implementation of what a consumer is supposed to be. So you have a consume method, and then you just define logic, for what you want to do with the message that you have. So in essence, I have this structure here for how I defined how I want the JSON to be parsed. So I have a message and then a source. Ultimately, that's going to be coming from any application that I want to log. Currently, I only have set up my Rust microservice to log to this so far, but you kind of get the idea. So I have a consume method, and then I'm basically parsing out that message. So it was the hello world and bye world from that context, and then you can see that I am calling the same thing as I am on my logging hub that you saw, but this time I'm using hub, and I'm actually injecting a custom iHub context using my logging hub into this consumer class. And that's the way you can do that. That's the way you can establish or use SignalR outside of the context. You can actually inject it into the class that you want to use it in, which is super cool. So you can do stuff like this, meaning I can consume off a queue and then immediately broadcast it with SignalR. That's super powerful. It's really, really practical, and ultimately it's really useful too, because like what we just saw, basically I can go right from a queue to my front end, which is really, really powerful. So I'm basically doing the same thing here, and then broadcasting it to all my clients, and it's making its way all the way down to my front end on logging that TSX. So basically it sets the state on there, and that's honestly, that's really it. It looks like a little more than really what it is, but honestly, once you've wired everything up and you really can just follow the documentation, it works really, really well. And again, the program.cs wiring up you have to do is you just have to make sure you map your hub that you've created with map hub, and you have to use this right here. Make sure you add SignalR. You might have to adjust any kind of cross-origin scripting stuff to allow localhost to talk to it. You might not, though. And honestly, that's really about it. It's really, really powerful, and that gets you real-time notifications coming from the server to the client. But coming back to my queue and my front end, so again, I can make this message whatever I want. It's just plain text, and I'm just parsing that JSON object. So if we just, real-time notifications, you can imagine that this message gets sent to the queue, and immediately the front end gets reflected. So it's insanely powerful. And the nice thing about RabbitMQ is that you can see, get a list of all the things that are registered to consume this queue. You can get a list. I mean, it's really powerful. You can get a throughput kind of graph. You can see how many messages are queued. I mean, you can see how many the ready, unacknowledged. I mean, it's really, really powerful stuff. This is a super practical thing to know. It's going to come up again in so many jobs that you're going to have as a software engineer. Just having this capability and having an example of implementing this is going to be, I think, really, really helpful. So I would just encourage everyone to look up documentation on this. Follow SignalR docs. If you want to connect it to RabbitMQ, go for it. That just adds another level of complexity that you can talk about and get familiar with. In my specific scenario, I'm going from I'm using queues as a way to handle high message throughput. That's typically what queues are useful for, or at least one thing they're useful for. And that's kind of about it. I don't know what other technical things I want to go into in the near future about this system. I still have a ton of work to do on it, but the stuff I have wired up works really well. And again, I'm using Rust in another layer on the back end to handle the bulk of my data processing. And I've seen numbers over 1 million messages in a minute and a half. So really, really cool stuff. Again, got a lot of work to do. I'm going to show you kind of like, I guess, kind of like a teaser into the next feature that I'm working on. So the next one is this geolocation button. not going to go too much into that, but that's the feature that I'm working on. It's going to be using some really interesting technology to, I think, create something really cool. I hope it's going to be really interesting. I'm like it's like super experimental right now. It's like pre-prototype phase. It's like it works, but it's like 90% broken pretty much. But what prototype isn't like 90% broken anyway? So I'm making progress on it when I can. It's honestly like it's a feature that I've been wanting to add in for a while, and I just have gotten to a spot in my system that I have the opportunity to, I think, introduce it. But yeah, it's location based data, and then it's gonna it's gonna do some pathing algorithms. Basically, is what it's gonna do. The harder part I'm running into is structuring that on the front end in a way that makes sense. Again, I'll get more into that, but yeah, it's gonna be super cool. So this system has a lot of stuff that I'm trying to incorporate. I'm trying to use a lot of technologies on purpose, mainly just to build my exposure to a lot of different things I maybe wouldn't regularly come into contact with on my like regular job. So yeah, so that's we're keeping at it, and I'm working on this in the background, and I got tons and tons of content coming down the pipeline for this thing. So yeah, stay tuned for the rest, and yeah, I'll see you on the next one.